It's Game Boy World, and this is Motocross Maniacs. Surprisingly, it took 5 whole months before Game Boy saw its first racing game. Perhaps less surprisingly, Game Boy's first racing game feels almost more like a puzzle platformer, because everything on Game Boy in its first few years was a puzzler or a platformer. Konami's Motocross Maniacs is a strange take on the racing genre. On a fundamental level, it seems to have been based largely on Nintendo's Excitebike. You control a man on a very slippery bike across a track consisting almost entirely of ramps. As an Excitebike, you need to either lean forward or lean backward as you take your jumps to avoid taking a tumble. In fact, the connection becomes even more suspicious once you realize that Motocross Maniacs followed very closely on the heels of a Japan-only Famicom game called Motocross Champion, released by Konami a couple of months before the Game Boy's debut. To call Motocross Champion similar to Excitebike would be an exercise in profound understatement. It's more like a shameless ripoff, with an obligatory new gimmick in place to set it apart from its obvious inspiration. In the case of Motocross Champion, the gimmick in question took the form of a legitimately looping track. Excitebike played out as something of a belt scroller with players moving unerringly in a straight line, yet somehow making laps around a track in the process. The technology of the time didn't really allow for truly circular tracks, so Nintendo simply abstracted the idea, and it worked fine. Motocross Champion, on the other hand, attempted to bring Excitebike's play to something resembling Atari's old top-down racing games like Grand Track 10, or if you want to be more contemporary about it, Ivan Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road by Leland or Rare's RC Pro-Am. It wasn't a bad idea, though in practice it proved to be somewhat clumsy. However, there's no question that its fast-paced racing and forced three-quarters perspective simply wouldn't have worked on Game Boy's blurry, monochromatic, low-resolution screen. And so in adapting the Motocross Champion concept to the platform as Motocross Maniacs, Konami almost completely reinvented it. Rather than using the bird's-eye view of its predecessors, Motocross Maniacs goes with a fixed side-scroller point of view. This obviously makes the three-dimensional track of Motocross Champion impossible, returning the game to something resembling Excitebike's conveyor belt design. And yet the fundamental addition that Motocross Champion brought to the table, making vertical navigation into something more complex than merely changing lanes, translates in its own way to Motocross Maniacs. Rather than building this extra axis of action into the game in the form of turns and laps though, Konami instead integrated it through suspended platforms. Players race along a track, but in most courses the ground level largely consists of mud that slows your bike. Since the goal of the game is not to outrace other motorists, but rather to earn the best possible time, you naturally want to avoid the mud. Your best course of action then is to race on the upper levels of the course. Suspended above the mud, you'll find ramps, half-pipes, and loops to drive along. If you can reach the raised portions of the track, you'll neatly avoid the mud and keep your time nice and short. Not only that, but these elaborate loops and bends contain any number of power-ups to collect, granting you time bonuses or extra bursts of nitro speed. Unlike most racers, you begin each course in Motocross Maniacs with a whopping 8 NO2 injections on hand, allowing for liberal application of speed boosts. But that's kind of the point of these races. You need to use nitrous, and use it smartly, in order to complete the courses properly. The suspended ramps and loops can't be utilized without the help of your nitro injector, and you need to know just when and where to hit the booster in order to complete each track efficiently. Play well and you'll always have just enough nitrous to get you through. Screw up though and you're in trouble. You'll hit the muddy ground and either waste time or waste nitros blasting through the mud. It's a tricky game requiring practice and mastery. As if the track layouts weren't complex enough, you still have to deal with the Excitebike-esque control physics. That means you need to know when to hit nitro to boost into a jump or through a loop, but also when to correct your lean to avoid taking a tumble. On top of that, you can also earn special bonuses for performing awesome tricks. The best bonus? Being able to blast multiple nitros in order to fly. That sure never happened in Excitebike. Interestingly though, as much as Motocross Maniacs resembles Excitebike, it also rather has a lot in common with Sonic the Hedgehog, a game that wouldn't be released for another couple of years. The emphasis on maintaining momentum, performing brash stunts, and all those intricate platforms. Very Sonic. Unfortunately, Motocross Maniacs lacks the polish of Sonic. Collision between your bike and courses is slippery to say the least. Sometimes it looks like you're driving above the track, sometimes embedded into it. The Game Boy's limited button setup also makes for some hardcore hand cramping, as you're basically always holding the accelerator while trying to thumb over to hit the nitro. It's not the kind of game you want to play for lengthy sessions, in other words. But, that makes it perfect for Game Boy, which was all about 5-minute play sessions long before mobile games existed. Motocross Maniacs isn't perfect, but its design was and remains fairly unique. Besides a couple of direct sequels, the only similar racing game that comes to mind is Trials Evolution. Motocross Maniacs doesn't quite qualify as an NES port, being fairly different in nature despite its obvious heritage from Motocross Champion. What it stands as instead is a damn fine conversion of a console game into a portable format, an attempt to work within the Game Boy's limitations that resulted in a pleasantly original creation. For more games that Sonic the Hedgehog probably totally ripped off, keep reading GameBoyWorld.com.